Okay, guys, let's get this show on the road. 1 second here. And we're live. Okay, guys, thanks for joining us on this really exciting Facebook Live conversation that we had planned. I got my two really good friends here, Corey and Marty. And we're going to be talking about niching down. So this is a conversation that started between me and Corey through just Messenger. Me and Corey have actually been chatting a lot over Messenger over the last couple of weeks. And we just get conversations going all the time. And this was one of the topics that we were just sort of rambling on about, I guess. And it ended up being a really solid conversation, and one that we kind of like. I mean, it was having a life of its own, and we thought it'd be a really good topic to talk about live on this group, so that we can get some questions, opinions, feedback, advice, experience from all of you guys, and just share ideas. So before we get started, I just want to give the floor over to Corey, just to give him a brief intro on him and his business and where he's at.
Awesome, thanks, Chris. So yeah, my name's Corey Dodd, and I am from Australia, and I run a graphic design and studio out of Victoria. I'm sort of really focused on branding and helping people with positioning themselves in the market. So that actually ties in a lot to this thing. And we've already sort of chatted about some of this stuff with you offline, Chris, or on Messenger. And it's just amazing that we just started this conversation and we put it in the group, and then before you know it, Marty's got involved, and we've got someone that's really got an expert level of knowledge in this stuff to sort of chat with us today. So, but yeah, the agency I've got is super small. It's me, and I've just taken on another person that's sort of here, I don't know, like 2 to 3 days a week. But I've been in business for maybe 2 years, but I've worked for myself before. I've got 20 years in the industry, so it's kind of all I've ever done, and I still love it. So I love working for myself. It's just amazing. But yeah, the business is going well. So I'm really looking at trying to take things to the next level. And I think sort of niching down is something that is a really hot topic for me at the moment. So I can't wait to get this started.
Yeah. And so just so everybody knows, with the conversation that we were having between me and Corey was actually considering niching down and had some concerns about it, wanted to run some questions by me and get my opinions and thoughts on it. So he's actively trying to niche down. I'm kind of a little bit on the fence about it, but like you said, we were fortunate, very fortunate enough to catch the attention of Mr. Marty Marion, and super stoked to have you here, Marty. So can you just give everybody who has been living under a rock and doesn't know who you are a brief intro to you and what you do?
Well, some of my best friends live under rocks. But thanks, Chris, and thanks, Corey, for inviting me on this. I'm Marty Marion, and short version is I've been in digital marketing since the digital age began, and mostly in the areas of strategic planning, brand positioning, SEO, and putting teams together to do full stack digital marketing. I'm the founder of a private Facebook group, Master Positioning Insiders. And I've been kind of waving the flag lately about this concept of brand positioning. And Chris, when you and Corey invited me into this conversation and started talking about niching down, I saw a tremendous synergy and an overlap between niching down as a concept, as a practice, and what positioning science attempts to do. And so I'm thrilled to be here. Welcome, everybody.
Yeah, and I don't think I could have had a better person on this live than you, Marty, because like you said, I mean, I've actually, just so everybody knows, I haven't gotten much work done today, and I was telling Marty and Corey about this because I've literally spent most of today just reading up online about niching down, how to niche down, all sorts of stuff. And a lot of what I've read always connected back to positioning, right? Like there's there's sort of three things that you're supposed to do when it comes to marketing in general, and that's like segmentation, targeting, and then positioning, right? So like those three steps, I mean, positioning is a core step of any marketing process. So yeah, I mean, I'm really happy to have you here. So like we already had got the conversation started a little bit, and so before we just so I guess to get the conversation going, Corey, can you like explain to people the decision that you were battling with, like what it was that you were thinking about, why you were thinking about niching down?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, so my business is going well, things are going good, and I've just been looking at, and you know, you come across this advice, and even for me, like just using logic, if you're not, this is the conversation that I would have around branding, and I think, you know, branding and positioning and niching all sort of work together. But the conversation that I would have someone with branding is, if you're not branding, you're still being branded, like you still have a brand, you're just not able to, I guess, not control, that's the wrong word, but you're not able to sort of impact or affect how the market is perceiving you. And so that's what I think with niching, like, you know, if your business is doing well and things are going great, or even if your business is doing bad, if you're not actually aware of who you're targeting and you're not niched onto something, then you're really kind of talking to everyone. And if you're talking to everyone, you're actually talking to no one. So that's my concern. And I looked at some niches, and there's two areas that I can go. And one is through, you know, my experience, so the customers that I've already been working with, and if I can identify, you know, the ones that are the good projects for me that work really well, that I'm super into and enjoy working on, but are also profitable and that I can give a lot of value to. So that I can find a niche through that direction, or I could actually look outside of the things that I currently do and go, well, what would I just purely enjoy, or are there things that I haven't discovered yet? So, I mean, that was a part of the debate that I had with you. But yeah, so I started to actively think about this and go, well, you know, what are some of the negative things? Like, it could impact, you know, I'm in that point where it almost scares me, because if I make a wrong decision, and it seems counterproductive to niche, right? Like, it seems like I'm going to narrow my market and give me less opportunity for clients. But everything that I understand about niching and having a targeted message tells me the opposite. You know, the more focused I can become, the deeper I can get into a market. That means that I'll be working with more of the same sort of people. But yeah, does that sort of explain where my head was at, and, you know, why I sort of got in touch with you about this sort of stuff? Yeah,
for sure. I mean, I think a lot of us, especially in my group, that have the same sort of thought patterns, right, and the same sort of concerns that you do. And it's funny though, because you say when you niche down that there's the fear that you're sort of cutting off half the market, or whatever the case might be. But you're sort of doing the same thing when you tell people you don't want to work with anybody who, you know, only wants to pay $2,000 for a website, right? Like you're essentially cutting off a large portion of the market at that point too. But you're not afraid to do that. But you are afraid to niche down, and that's kind of like
some people are. Yeah. Some people are afraid to do that. So I mean,
right, that's true.
I think that's a part of qualifying customers. And I think niching is definitely that next step. And, you know, I think maybe it's a good time to get Marty just to get maybe his explanation on really how, you know, what niching is, so we can get an overview for everyone that's online, and just to run through what a niche is and how it works, and your thoughts, Marty.
Yeah.
Sure. So I think actually, Corey, that you've hit on almost all the points, right? Which highlights one of the issues. This is something that Chris, you and I spoke about very briefly before. I think to start, we have a generalized problem with any jargon in an industry, right? Branding. You ask 20 people, they'll give you 25 different definitions. Yep. Positioning, marketing, niching down. What is a niche? What is a category? What's a subcategory, right?
Yep.
So you can define this a lot of different ways. And because each of us defines this in a different way, there's a general lack of a standard adoption of these terms. So that can get confusing, especially to new practitioners or service providers or companies that find themselves stuck and are looking for a way to grow or get over the hurdle that they've, you know, plateaued at, right? To me, the word niche really is somewhat synonymous with category or subcategory, right? But when you talk about it as, okay, so I'm a web developer, or I'm an SEO, or I'm a branding expert, whatever it is that you feel your skill set is, and you approach this concept of niching down based on your level of expertise, there's a benefit, but there's also a little bit of a disconnect. The benefit is that you can't really provide value the way you said, Corey, to your clients if you're not an expert. If you're not good at what you do, the value you give is going to be substandard, and you're going to wind up with unhappy clients, and that's going to hurt your reputation, and it cascades, right? Dominoes. One thing leads to the next, to the next. To me, I don't think that niching down should be looked at as trying to find some little corner of the universe that you can plant your flag in, right, and lay claim to, as much as it should be something that says, if you out there have this particular set of issues or problems, I'm the guy that can fix it. I'm the woman that can fix it. And so you start to now overlap your expertise with the market need. Mm-hmm. So when I look at things, and I tend to look at a lot of things backwards and upside down, but that's the kind of strange person I am. I see niching down as being adapting your messaging about what it is that you are and do and your expertise to a particular well-defined need in the market. So to me, a niche isn't really a target as much as it is, or a category, as much as it is a need.
Yep.
And I think if we all as marketers started to look more from the outside in, what are the needs? And can I fulfill that need? Can I overcome that problem, that pain point that the client is having? That makes a faster and an easier path to success. So going back to what you said earlier, Corey, niching down in one interpretation can be looked at as, who do I want to serve? Mm-hmm. What type of business do I want to do? I'm a web developer, so I want to do websites, but only in WordPress. And only for e-commerce businesses. And only for apparel retailers. In e-commerce, on WordPress. And so it just gets narrower and narrower and narrower.
Yep.
But none of that has defined or addressed the need. And I think the need part is the big missing piece.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's actually funny, Marty, because I was, throughout the day when I was, reading up on niching down, one of the things that sort of stood out for me was an article that I read where they said that, a niche is really, the best way to look at a niche is, what problem do you want to solve? What very specific problem do you want to solve for a very specific person? So it's like, if you make shoes, if you just say I make shoes, then you make shoes for everybody. So you're just gonna have generic shoes. But if you say I make shoes for farmers who suffer from chronic back pain or something, now you have you're solving a very specific problem, and that becomes your niche, right? And I was trying to sort of relate that to what I do in terms of digital marketing and things like that, and just try to get my wheels turning, right? But going back to what you said before about you actually have to have the expertise. that was something that I wanted to sort of touch on, because that was one of the points that I brought up with Corey, was that, you know, for me in my business, I've been doing this for 2 years now. I'm very early. I actually just left my full-time job about 3 months ago to pursue my business full-time. So I have a handful of clients that I've serviced, and they've been great clients and they've been great accounts and all that stuff. But I mean, I just don't have the volume of clients to really know what is the best, where do I bring the most value, what problem do I solve best, and then select a niche from that. Because I think, and that was my argument to Corey, is that, like, you know, I feel like there, in terms of when you should niche down, that there's almost going to be a feeling of like, you'll know when to niche down when the time is right. You'll have enough clients, you'll have worked with enough people that you know this is the market that I deliver the most value in. And if you select a niche with value first in mind, I mean, I don't think you'll ever go wrong in terms of choosing a niche, right? But you sort of need to have that experience. And so, you know, what are your thoughts on that? Do you think that you can niche down earlier, or is that just something that is like inherent part of niching down, that you sort of have to just, you know, put your time in, so to speak?
Man, I love the way you said that. So I don't think that niching down is necessarily time dependent. I think if you are self-honest and you have really evaluated honestly what your expertise is, what your skill set is, what your experience is, what your successes have been, and I'm going to add one more ingredient in there, what you're passionate about, right? Because we all know, Corey, Chris, we all know that if you get up in the morning and you're not excited about what you're going to do that day, you're just not going to do it well.
Yeah.
So skill, experience, expertise, successes, and passion kind of define what you're doing, what you want to do, what you should be doing, right? And at that point, the niche almost finds you.
Yeah, and that was sort of what I was alluding to, right? Is like, it's sort of you gotta have to test the water, so to speak, to figure out, you know, where it is that you belong. And one of the things that I also wanted to throw in here that I thought was really interesting that I read was that you don't necessarily need to find a niche. Like when you select a niche, that it doesn't necessarily have to be written in concrete that is now what you do and forever that is what you do. I mean, your niche can grow and change along with your business, right? Your business is going to change. What your business is now is not going to be what it is in 2 years, and so does your niche. Your niche doesn't have to be the same either. And one of the examples that I ran into was the guys who created what's the name of this service, the Empire Flippers or Empire. Mm-hmm. Yeah, these guys started off selling some sort of I don't know if there was a course or whatnot, but they were doing a platform where you would monetize a site using AdSense. And that was what they did, is they would help people monetize sites using AdSense. But as the business grew, their niche grew into this, you know, Empire Flippers, where they'll help you grow a business and then flip it for a profit or whatever the case might be, and turn it into an exit strategy. And I thought that was interesting because, you know, I'm thinking about it in terms of what we're doing, what we're talking about right now in terms of when is the right time to niche down. Well, your niche could be super small right now, but I mean, in 6 months from now, once you have determined that, you know, this is great, and you know, I've gotten some clients in this market, I've done a great job, but now I want to tackle bigger problems. Now your niche can be a bigger niche. And now you have sort of a proven track record because you have something to base your results off of, and now you can get into a bigger market and scale from there, right?
Well, something that you sort of mentioned then, Chris, as well, and this was sort of going back to your first comment, or earlier comment with sort of, you know, having these niched areas, is that and with the time of your business, like how long you've been in business, and from my experience, like when you've been in business for a longer time, you work with more and more people, so it still becomes, you might have more data on which you can go back and look at projects and go, oh, these were successful projects. So, but still, the pool can get really wide if you're just generalizing. So I think at some point, if you go into niche, I'm not 100% sold that you need to do that like later on down the track. I think like what Marty was saying, it's essentially if you're open and honest and with yourself and go, these are the things that I'm really passionate about. And I put a shared Venn diagram with the group before, which was essentially saying, trying to find your target, your ideal client is really that overlap between the stuff that you love doing, the people that need that stuff, and the people that are willing to pay you the most for it. So if you can kind of overlap those things, like the thing that you really like to do, the thing that you're an expert in, and that people will pay you a lot for, that's where your sort of target market comes from, if you can overlap those things. And I don't necessarily think that comes from time. So for me, the more time I've spent and the more people that I've worked with, the more open that it becomes, because at one point I'd never worked with people in healthcare, and then you start working with people in healthcare, and then I've never worked, you haven't worked with people in construction, and then you're working with people in construction. So it kind of opens it up. So I'm not sure if there's a perfect time. What do you think with that, Marty? Is there a time to be niching, or is there a sweet spot or a perfect moment?
I think we as providers of services are always niching from day one till we decide to change our business model. And because we have a certain set of skills, whether you're an SEO, a brand positioning expert, a web designer, an agency builder, a consultant, it doesn't matter what you do. There is always a market of some target, some consumer, some client that is looking for what you do. And while we're always focused with where do we get more clients from, right? And a lot of people are focused on how do I grow my agency? How do I grow my business? Well, I need more clients. Where do I find them? Well, if you start looking at it from the outside in and you say, there are lots of people out there who need a website, who need SEO, who need guidance, who need branding, positioning, and they're looking for me. And one of my mentors early in my career said to me, remember this, in any marketing, in any business, fish where the fish are, or you won't catch any.
Yep.
And when you take a step back and you think about that for a minute, it really makes a lot of sense, right?
Yeah.
So there are people out there looking for you, and you're out there looking for them. It's kind of like, how do the two come together? Where is that intersection, right?
Yeah.
So the game hide and seek, right? You're hiding in the closet, and all your friends close their eyes and count to 10, and they try to find you, right? Well, what happens if you're hiding in the closet, and you even have a big sign on the closet, and it says, I'm in here, and no one's looking? You're going to stay there, right?
Yeah.
So the trick here is to balance who needs you in terms of what your honest skill set is.
Yeah.
And how do you get in front of them in such a way that they understand, see, accept that your skill set's going to solve their problem. So, Chris, what you said earlier about problem solving in the area of niching down is what we had talked about a little before. You don't want to niche down because you want to narrow, and it doesn't mean narrowing. I don't think that niching down means cutting off a piece of your potential market.
Let's call it focusing.
I love it, man. You're right, Corey. It's focusing. So, to me, instead of being the expert in something, be the problem solver for the problems that a group has because you're the expert.
Yep. Yeah. Look, I think you raised a really important point too, that we are always sort of niching, and you generally when people are niching organically, like you're saying, that's through services, and I've done that myself. I started off with a broader range of stuff, and I've narrowed that down and said I've found stuff that I just don't enjoy doing. It's not worth my time. It's not that profitable for me. And I've removed those services. Some of those services I will provide for customers, but I'm certainly not putting them out there to the world. It's only for existing clients. And so I was thinking about that, and that's really what you've got, those two areas within niching, and one is the sort of horizontal, and that's when what I think most people will do organically, where they sort of go, well, I'm a graphic designer or I'm a web designer, and then they'll say, well, I'm going to focus on WordPress. It's still very broad. Maybe I'm going to sort of focus on Genesis, or I'm going to specify a framework, or maybe I'm going to be an e-commerce person and just do WooCommerce. Maybe I'm Shopify, whatever, and that's sort of that horizontal type of niching. And then there's the vertical one, which is, I think that's the harder one to me and Chris have been trying to wrap our heads around. That's the harder one to grapple, where you actually look at an industry or a client base and go, look, I think these are the people that I can serve best. Like, these are the ones that when I spend time with them, it's everything's flying, everything's working really well. We connect. I'm providing them the best value. They are getting a great product, so they really love it, and they're happy to pay me. And so there's that double, thank you, where there's a value exchange between what I've done for them and that they're paying me for it. And so we both end up winning. But I think that's the scarier one to pick, where you go, I'm just going to focus on, and again, that niche could start wide. You might say, well, I'm going to start with healthcare. And you go, like, no, I'm going to do GPs. And you can narrow that in to go, well, just podiatrists or just a specialist. So, you can start wide with a niche and bring that in. So, yeah, what are your thoughts on that, as far as the horizontal versus vertical niche, and what one is beneficial, or if it's going to be different for depending on the circumstances or what you offer?
So, great question, and I'm not sure that one precludes the other.
Yep.
I think that there's a universe. If you think in 3 dimensions instead of just horizontal or vertical niching, I think that most successful operators are going to be those who find this sweet spot, right, between their skill set and the needs of a target audience. So you used the example earlier. On day one, right, you've just, and I'm going to put air quotes around this, you've just decided that you are an expert web developer. Okay, great. And it just so happens that through connections or just by luck, your first 2 or 3 clients are in healthcare.
Yep.
Well, after you've done 2 or 3 projects, you kind of feel like you have a bit more knowledge. You speak the language. You know the ins and outs, what the challenges in the healthcare industry are.
Yep.
So that kind of pushes you somewhat, nudges you to say, well, I can go out and find more healthcare clients because my experience gives me the confidence to provide a higher level of value to more healthcare clients, right? And that makes perfect sense. But then I'll use your example again, Corey, and your next 3 clients are in the construction industry. Okay, so now you have 2 skill sets, right?
Yep.
But instead of them being 2 skill sets, let's think of them as 2 simultaneous abilities to solve similar problems for 2 different markets. Because they both have the same problem. I need a web presence. So it almost doesn't matter, and it does to a little degree, whether you're providing web development services for a healthcare client, a retail client, a construction industry client, a chiropractor. What matters is that their need is that they need a better presence online.
Yep.
Right? That may convert better, or may educate their market better, or may capture leads better, whatever their objectives are. And you have the capability to provide that. So there's a meshing, if you will, of need with skill.
Yep.
Their need, your skill. When those come together, you've kind of defined your niche, or it's defined you.
Yeah.
It's interesting, actually, because one of the things that I've definitely can attest to is that when you do select a niche, your messaging gets so powerful. like you get such laser focused messaging that it almost, I think that is one of the things that really helps to propel things forward, is the fact that like you speak so directly to people that you know, your copy and everything is really powerful, and I definitely see that as being one of the biggest advantages of having a very specific niche. But like if we look at who the people in, you know, are in this Facebook group are, or even any of the other Facebook communities, like where there's a lot of web developers and digital marketers, a lot of us are freelancers or small agencies who are trying to kind of grow things out, right? And if you, it can be definitely scary to say I'm only going to work with these people when it's hard to get, you know, deals even into the pipeline, right? And I know that there's sort of a bit of a conundrum there, because by niching down, you actually there's a potential of you actually being able to fill your sales pipeline faster with more deals, because you actually, you know, narrow things down, and it's kind of like contradictory or whatever. But one of the things that I was trying to grapple in my head is, okay, if you select a very specific niche and say I'm only going to deal with chiropractors in my city who have this specific problem, right? How do you then, and this is a question for you, Marty, because this is a positioning question, how do you then use that niche, that specificity, to position yourself as a small agency, right? Like we're talking about freelancer level, where we don't have huge offices or a large impressive client base that we can kind of resort to and say, look, you call any of these big companies and they'll vouch for me. How do you use that niche selection, and how do you position or deposition competition?
Wow. Big question. Good one, though. And it's probably one of the most important questions. I agree that the majority of the people in the Facebook groups that we're active in are either solo providers or parts of small teams or small agencies or mid-sized agencies. There are some big players, don't get me wrong. And you talk about the differentiation of yourself versus the competition. And again, what positioning says is stop talking about yourself. Go outside in. What does the client want? What does the client need? What is their pain point, right? And if you have an honest skill set that meets that pain point, then say so. Now, in positioning, we talk about 4 essential elements that go into a positioning, right? The first is you have to provide a meaningful benefit. Well, that's your skill set, right? Number 2 is the meaningful benefit that you're promising or you're offering has to be provable. It has to be substantiable. You have to be able to demonstrate it. Number 3, it has to be different. You have to be differentiated from your competition. But element number 4 is where the rubber meets the road. And that's what we call depositioning. And depositioning is really the art of conveying the following message to your target. All those other guys out there are not going to be able to solve your pain point the way I can. So, for example, if you're a solo operator, maybe part of your offering message is they're going to get a lot more attention because they're a more important part of your total portfolio mix, as opposed to going to a big agency where maybe I'm not going to get the kind of attention I'm going to get from an individual who's more committed to my business. And I think this is going to vary greatly depending on the nature of the industry, right? So if you can craft this positioning concept, we call it positioning platform, so that every one of your messaging touch points conveys this, then you don't really compete against your competition as much as you do an end run around them.
Yeah, that makes sense. That definitely makes sense. The one thing that I'm sort of that I'm still sort of trying like struggling with is the concept of, you know, the results that you, or the solution that you have has to be measurable, right? And if for the guys that are early on, or sort of like in the growing phase of their business, where they have like maybe a good handful of clients, sort of like myself, you know, there isn't any way to prove that you can attain those measurable results. It's sort of, so you almost, and this is what I find, I think that most people are depositioning their competition with price, right? They say, you know, nobody's going to be able to get you these results for this price, and then they get and they devalue their work by saying, you know, by accepting $2,000 projects when they should be $7,000 or $8,000 projects, right? So
I hear this all the time, Chris, and I tell everyone the same thing. If your differentiation, if your competitive advantage, whatever you want to call it, is based on price, then you have just entered a fast race to the bottom.
Yeah.
Okay? Because, and let's role play for a second. You and I are competitors. We're going after the same clients. And you say, I'll do it for $3,000. And I say, okay, well, I'll get you the same kind of results or better for $2,000. And you really want this client because it's a portfolio client, right? It's a reference client, big name. You say, you know what? I'll do it for $1,000. Now I have to come back and I have to say, well, I'll do it for $500. And all of a sudden you wind up taking on clients where you're upside down financially,
Yeah.
relative to your urgent compulsion to over-deliver for them. And you go to bed at night and you wake up in the morning resenting having taken that client. So you're not going to do your best work. The client's going to see it and feel it. The results aren't going to materialize. I think pricing is a really, really bad generalized approach to building your business. Now, when you're starting, yeah, maybe you do need to be a little bit price competitive compared to a more well-established competitor. To me, I think if you can find a way to frame your offering in a way that makes all the other quote-unquote competitors obsolete, then that's the home run. Then you don't have to worry about price because you're the only guy that does it this way, or the only woman who does it this way.
Yeah, it's like the whole blue ocean strategy, right? You sort of carve out your own blue ocean and get outside of the feeding frenzy of the market, right?
Yeah. I tend to have all these fish analogies, right?
You do.
You fish where the fish are. Another one of the analogies that I use a lot is, do you really want to be a small fish in a very big pond and have to constantly eat the next bigger fish to grow your business? Or wouldn't it make more sense to start a whole new pond and be the only fish in that pond, which makes you the biggest one, and then grow the pond?
That's,
right?
You know, I actually really love this analogy because I just thought about this and I'm like, you know, most of my web design clients have all been relatively like good budgets, like, and I've been fortunate for that, right? And I've had a few like 10K plus projects that I've worked on, which have been great. And I've never really, like, I have had a few times where I've had to kind of like negotiate on price and stuff, but it's not a normal thing for me. So when you say, you know, would you rather be a small fish in a big pond? In my head, I was thinking, you know, like I am a small fish in a really big pond right now, and somehow I'm still finding some of these larger fish, which is great. But my main problem in my business right now is that the frequency, the number of times that I get these big fish, they're just not coming in regularly enough. And although I feed really well, when I get one of these projects, it's got to last me until I swim around long enough and find the next big one. And kind of bringing that back to the analogy of a bigger fish in a small pond, you're feeding a lot more often because you're not having to find a source of food. You're right there, and it's all right there in your like little pond, right? So I almost think that you're definitely onto something in that the sales problem is fixed because you know exactly where to fish. Right? Like you're in that small pond, where that target demographic, that target market is spending their time. And so you can spend all your time there and you can be there in front of them all the time. And you're probably a lot more likely to close deals, even though the market size is a lot smaller.
Yeah, and that's true, but go back a step in this chronology for a moment. You wouldn't have created this new pond where you're going to be the biggest fish by default, right?
Right.
If you hadn't already defined something very special about that pond that's going to attract the others, the clients, in there. You're not just going to do it for the fun of it.
Right.
You're doing it for business reasons, right?
Right.
You're doing it to showcase your advantage, right? And I think that there's a three-dimensional, as we said before with Corey, this is not horizontal or vertical only. I think this is three-dimensional. And I think that there's an intersection of a need of a potential client, an expertise of a potential provider, and I think there's also the pressure of the competitive set. Who else is out there that's trying to push you aside and get to these clients before you or better than you, right? So you've got these three pieces now: target, you, competitors. If there were no competitors, you wouldn't have a problem. Every client would have to come to you.
Yeah, that's right?
Easy to find them. So the real issue is not necessarily you or what you are, and it's not even the needs of the target audience. The real challenge is you're not the only guy doing what you do.
That's right.
You're not the only woman offering what you offer. So how do you take what it is that you are and you do and craft it in such a way that it obsoletes all those other competitors? Because your home run is to play on a playing field where there's no defenders.
Yeah, that's right. Because the more narrow the niche, the idea is the more narrow the niche, the less competition there is. But I mean, go and look at personal injury lawyers in Los Angeles, and and I'm sure that you'll see that there's a fierce competition there. That there's a lot of people trying to get into that very specific niche. But so it's not always the case, is what you're saying, and it's still a problem even when you niche down, right?
Let's use your example: personal injury lawyers in Los Angeles. And I'm going to just make this up for fun. Let's suppose that you're a personal injury lawyer in Los Angeles area, right? And we're talking about big ticket cases, right? Usually take these on contingency, and if you win, there's a big payday at the end, but maybe it's a year or two or three or more, and there's no guarantee you're going to win the case or the award, right?
Yeah.
Well, let's think about Los Angeles for a moment. Very crowded city. Nobody wants to drive in LA. It's a nightmare. So, let's see. Hey, maybe a lot of people ride their bikes or motorcycles, right? Because you can get around traffic easier than being in a car. And in rush hour, instead of spending 8 hours getting home 3 blocks away, you're on your bike or your motorcycle, you get home in 5 minutes. Maybe that might speak to a higher preponderance of bike and motorcycle accidents in Los Angeles than you might find in Kansas City, right? So now as a personal injury lawyer, maybe I want to hang out my shingle emphasizing my unique expertise in bicycle and motorcycle accidents. And that is one way to, quote unquote, niche down. But at the same time, it's a way to eliminate the competitors of all these generalist personal injury attorneys.
Right. So
build your credentials as a specialist, right?
That's
so
true,
there
because
are a lot of
yeah, because what you're saying is that you're at that point you're depositioning the competition because you're now the person that specializes in those particular types of accidents, and even though there's still the same number of competitors that can service that one particular market, you're now the guy who's more specialized in that, and therefore all of your messaging can go to deposition the competition and say nobody else can solve your problem like we can because we specialize in this particular area, right?
And just to repeat your words back to you in a little different way, if you are the subject matter expert in motorcycle accidents, in personal injury law, that implies that everybody else isn't.
That's right.
You don't have to attack the competitors. Depositioning does not and should not need to go negative.
Right.
Right? If you craft it correctly, it does that for you. The consumer, your target, realizes, well, if he's the best, then the others aren't. If he's the specialist, the others aren't. If she's the true guru, I hate that word, in a particular subject matter or field or technology, then the others aren't. Where am I going to get my needs better filled? Where's my pain point going to be alleviated faster, better? With the expert.
Yep.
Right?
And you both were pointing out something which I think that people will relate to if I sort of elaborate on this a little bit, is that we started the conversation in a place where we were saying that a niche isn't always going to be finite. It isn't always going to be fixed. There should be some sort of organic nature to it. And so, Chris, with what you were sort of saying with the LA lawyer sort of situation, that's a little bit like if you take our industry and you said, well, if you were talking, 10 years ago, you could say, well, I'm a responsive, web developer, right? And people weren't on that. Now, if you were talking now, you could get away with saying like, I'm SEO for voice, and that's a niche. But in 5 years' time, like that's probably going to be a given. So you're going to have to find another way to actually niche within that. So something that's a niche now isn't a niche forever. So, like I said, voice is something that people know is coming. And if you got onto that early, you could just specialize in just being the voice person, the voice guy, the voice girl, and you do SEO for voice. And that will work for you very well, but it's not going to always be the case. So it needs to be some sort of reshuffling and an organic sort of approach to this sort of niching sort of setup.
Yeah, I agree with you, and actually, and I'll probably end up dropping this in the comments after this is done. But I stumbled on a PDF from a lady who manages another Facebook group, and it was pretty good resource because like it actually broke down the whole niching down process into sort of like a formulaic procedure or whatever, and I thought that was pretty interesting. But one of the things that she did mention in the document was that whatever niche you choose, it should have an evergreen property to it, because obviously you don't want you're going to dry up your potential market.
Yeah.
So that kind of goes to what you were saying, is that what is a niche now, or what is a niche now may not be a niche in 5 months or 6 months, and definitely for me that's a bit of a concern, because SEO is there's always this and I'm not going to get into this now, but there's always the whole SEO is dead type of thing that goes around, so it's kind of always at the back of my mind. But I mean, I definitely see the power in niching down and I know this firsthand from the the other side of the sort of the shit end of the stick, I should say, because one of the first clients I ever got, I actually lost them after I finished the project with them. I ended up losing them to another competitor who niche down, and they were a medical sort of like in the health industry, I should say, and their business, their agency was, we do digital marketing for health based businesses, and
Yep.
for that, and I don't blame my client for jumping ship with me, because if I were in her shoes, I'd probably do the same thing, right? Like, this agency, all they do is marketing for this particular market, for my market. And I'm sure if you went to their website, they would just have all sorts of articles on how, marketing should work for that particular market, which reinforces that decision to the potential client or the prospect or whatever. But, my concern also was the fact that, like, and we've already talked about this, but just to kind of touch on it again, was that I'm a little bit reluctant to niche down, because that same client, came back to me about 4 months ago and said, I touched base with them. I said, how are things going? And she said, they're going okay. But their marketing sort of lost a little bit of steam, and they weren't so happy with, they were happy, but their expectations were sort of not really met. And that's sort of what I want to try to avoid, is being able to, is sort of selecting a niche, trying to deliver a very specific solution to that very specific problem, and then not having the right things or the right solutions in place. But I think, like you said, Marty, as long as you're pairing your niche to your expertise, then that really shouldn't be too much of a problem, right?
Well, I think that both you and Corey have made very good points, but I think they're different points. Corey first raised the issue of, well, the concept that if you had been really up on your game and you knew that mobile voice searching was going to become a big thing soon, and you really honed your skills and understood the nuances of that, and put yourself out there as the voice search expert, implying all the other SEOs weren't, right? That could have been great. But let's suppose that voice search goes away, right? Let's suppose that some other technology comes into play. There are times at which, and I don't want to use the word niche down again or niche sideways, I don't use the word reposition.
Yeah.
Right? So you've got positioning, which is establishing in the mind of your target consumer what they believe about you.
Yep.
Which should be positive about you and less favorable about the competitors. That's the positioning.
Yep.
Depositioning part is exactly as you brought up, Chris, where the client saw the shiny object of going with a specialty focused, niche down provider. And here they are sometime later, not quite as happy as they thought they were going to be. Right?
Yep.
Okay. So positioning, depositioning, and repositioning. And if you have that life cycle curve mapped out for your own business, that's the win.
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah, that's great, man. Honestly, I think we're gonna probably cut this off here, because I'm having some technical difficulties with Zoom again. I don't even know if we're still live. Are you guys still here?
I'm here.
Okay.
I'm here. Yeah.
So yeah, I think we'll cut this off now. Thank you, Marty, for sharing your knowledge,
Yeah,
dropping some
Marty.
value bombs, and sharing some of your experience and expertise. Corey, thank you for jumping on this as well. This is definitely one of those topics that I think people can sort of chat about forever, because there's never really, it feels like you never really come to a final conclusion. But
Well,
There's no right or wrong.
Right. Yeah, for sure.
Thanks, Chris, for the invite. You know what we should do? Let's get some comments in from any of the people that have been watching this or will watch it on replay. And then let's have a follow-up session, answer some questions.
Yeah, I would love
Beautiful.
to do that. For sure.
Perfect.
All right,
All right.
thanks,
Well,
guys.
thank you very much. Thanks, guys.
Take care, guys.
Bye.
Bye.